Hello and thank you for joining me for a closer look at this W Dragon 135 scale Allosaurus figure. I was greatly excited when I saw the first promotional images of this figure because I love Allosaurus, it's my favourite dinosaur, and I find a lot of the figures are severely lacking. So it was nice to see one that actually captured the ferocity and the dynamism that I feel this dinosaur probably had. So first off, let's get the critical bits over with. This figure is called Gwangi, and that is because it is designed as a tribute to the 1969 film The Valley of Gwangi. Now, the coloration of the figure, in the body at least, certainly reflects that 1969 character, but the only way you could truly tell it was a tribute to Gwangi would be via this box art. That depicts Gwangi, the 1969 version, so obviously it was a very dated restoration by modern terms, and W Dragon have chosen to make a more modern interpretation of Allosaurus for modern fans, really, which is perfectly understandable. I think the reference would perhaps be a little bit obscure. Also, the box art is optional. You don't have to get a box for this figure. It's a little bit cheaper if you don't get the box, but as a collectible, I think it's very much worthwhile paying that little bit extra and getting the box. Which brings me to the second point, because this figure is supposedly a limited edition of 300 pieces. However, there's nothing on the box, there's nothing in the box, there's nothing on the figure, and there's nothing on its base to confirm this. In fact, there are no markings, date stamps, anything, country of origin. There is no information on this dinosaur or its base at all. It's somewhat anonymous, which is a little unusual. It's a bit of a shame for collectors. It probably wouldn't have been too hard for them just to write an edition number on, or to provide a little certificate of authenticity or something like that. But aside from that, the other critics will have are of the anatomy of this figure, because I've looked at a lot of restorations of Allosaurus and I haven't seen any which look quite like this. Now, Allosaurus was a very large animal. It got to similar lengths to Tyrannosaurus rex, estimated at 13 metres for some individuals. However, it was far lighter, it had a totally different killing style. I think it used its head as a hatchet, because it had very fragile teeth, and it didn't have a particularly strong bite force. The bite force was about the equivalent of a Labrador dog, which doesn't sound too much, but I've seen what Labrador dogs can do to general household items, so it's not something to be sniffed at. However, the skull could take an impact of up to 6 tons, and the neck muscles were incredibly powerful, so they think that between that and being able to gape its jaws extremely wide, Allosaurus used its head as a hatchet, slammed that into its prey, and basically caused them to bleed to death by taking chunks of flesh out. Pretty nasty stuff. So, what they've done with the skull, it's got the crests of Allosaurus. In fact, they've chosen to design these is a very, very nice design. I've not seen Allosaurus crests done quite like this before. If you look at the top here, you get quite a good view of them as well. And they're almost heraldic in their style, which is quite nice. But the face, overall, the skull, Allosaurus' skull was quite rectangular in most profiles, and we're not seeing that here. The back of the head slopes off a bit, it should be more squared off, although you could perhaps explain that away by saying you've got muscle insertion from this big neck at the back here, and this is just skull ornamentation, which is an optical illusion. However, what you definitely can't explain away is this rather pointed snout. Now, the other thing about Allosaurus is they think it ate someone like a falcon, and that it ripped dead prey to pieces, drew the head back, and it does look somewhat falcon-like. I mean, it really does look like a big predatory bird, albeit a very plucked one, and they've really managed to capture that kind of quality with this very effectively. Other issues with the anatomy are physically the body here looks a bit like a Greg Paul Tyrannosaurus rex to me. This hump with the back, again, I haven't seen any restorations which have this sort of curvature in the spine here. This is something you do see more commonly in some slightly older restorations of Tyrannosaurus rex. And the size of the thighs here. Allosaurus did have very long legs, however they were very slim, so the feet are perhaps on the large side too. The tail, Allosaurus had a very long tail, but nonetheless, this tail is perhaps a little bit too long. It's, however, very well muscled. They've got a great big quadrifemoralis muscle sculpted in here, which is a nice touch. And the other thing which perhaps lets the figure down as an Allosaurus a little bit is the hands. It's perhaps a little difficult to see here. All the fingers have large claws, but Allosaurus had a very large, powerful thumb with a large hooked claw, and that is not particularly represented here in this figure. The hands are quite generic theropod. But now that I've got all those bits out of the way, let's have a look at the good points of the figure, and there are plenty. I mean, this is a beautifully designed figure. It's very dynamic, and the attention to detail is stunning. There's very few figures I've seen which are sculpted with this sort of fine degree of detail. And when you looked at the promotional pictures, which were digital, it had these blazing eyes, which have been replicated quite well here. Orange to yellow, outlined in black. It really is beautiful. There is no bleeding in the paintwork. Stunningly done. Lots of detail on the skull here. The only slightly odd thing about this is the crests are a sort of crushed raspberry colour. They're not really the red that I would have expected. They're just showing a little more red on camera than they actually are in real life. They're definitely a colour which reflects the inside of the mouth more, which is a kind of dark pink colour. Now, if we look at the inside of the mouth here, there is abundant detail. And the way the head has been assembled gives a great sense of depth to the throat. It's been beautifully done. There's a lot of detail on that little tongue as well. Absolutely fabulous stuff. Gorgeously done. A lot of detail in the neck. They've chosen to make the flesh on the neck a little more gnarly, somewhat harder and more reinforced, which I suppose figures. A lot of modern predators like to bite each other in the necks and in the face, and dinosaurian pathologies show that a lot of predatory dinosaurs did the same. Some of these did have, it's a bit of artistic license, but it's a nice touch. These reinforced little nodules in the skin and, tough keratinized hide in this area. And as you can see, where Gwangi is looking to the left, the skin folds are pulled taut. So on the left side, they're folded in. And the detail here, the way the detail is picked out with the paintwork, is it's highlighted, which gives a great sense of depth and texture. And you can just see the underside of the figure here. There's a lot of detail on the underside there. And again, they haven't gone overboard with the scalation of the hide. It's very, very neatly done. Because Allosaurus was such a large character, such a large animal, you would not necessarily have been able to see individual scales if you were looking at it from a distance. So this replicates that. A lot of companies make the mistake of over-texturing their models, and it always just looks a little bit odd. It doesn't look particularly realistic. What they've also done is this leg, which supports the figure, they have made that from a different material. It's made from a very hard acrylic material which has no give in it at all. So this figure should not warp or distort or collapse at all, which plagues a lot of fully PVC figures. They tend to distort and fall over, and you end up propping them up on something. It's very frustrating. The base is detachable, which is a lovely touch, and there's certain other companies which could learn a lot from that. I mean, the figure will not stand without its base. It's forward heavy if you take it off its base. However, it's nice to be able to remove it and to handle it. Certain other company, if you do happen to remove the figures from the base, they've got a peg sticking out the foot, so you still can't really handle them. Whereas W Dragon have very sensibly put the peg in the base. It's a fairly plain base, but it's very effective. The foot fits perfectly into that print, so you don't get the figure rotating at all, and it should remain perfectly balanced on there. They've also put some felt on the base to try and stop it from slipping on slippery surfaces, which is nice. It should stop the figure from falling, having any tumbles and knocks and the paint scuffing. Sits in there very neatly, as you can see. Right, now if we look at the other side, if you look at the figure from the front here, you can see the posture is very dynamic. It really is beautifully done. If you look at it from this angle, it really does look like it's bearing down on something, it's surrounding something, circling something. However, slightly odd postural issue is that the knees are totally parallel. Now, if I'm running, I tend to use my whole thigh, and I feel this thigh should possibly be swung back a little for the leg to be bent to this degree as well, and the foot to be raised to this degree. But that's just a minor niggle, I'm not going to worry too much about that. Some beautiful little studs in the hide here. Nothing overboard. They haven't gone overboard with frills and crests and spikes and spines and things like that, like a certain other Allosaurus restoration, which I shall bring out now for size comparison. Most dinosaur toy fans will probably have come across this figure or indeed have it in their collection. This is the Papo Allosaurus. This figure, unlike the W Dragon, has an articulated jaw. The W Dragon figure's jaw is fixed. That suits me fine, because I sometimes find that articulated jaws are a little bit of a gimmick. And they can, in fact, in some cases, if they're badly done, detract from the appearance of the figure, so I'm not going to worry too much about that. But the W Dragon figure is a little larger, and probably about as anatomically accurate as the Papo one, or not, as the case may be. It certainly has better points than the Papo one in that its hands are not uncinnated. They are not pronated, they're uncinnated, as you can see. Clappers not slappers, as they say. And also, it's just generally a better, more finished figure, but you'd expect that from a high-end figure like this. So I hope you've enjoyed having this closer look at Gwangi, and I hope you will join me for the next video, in which I'm hoping to do the Eofauna Giganotosaurus. It's another figure which I'm extremely excited about, again another Allosauroid, or even an Allosaurid. But I'm absolutely delighted with this figure, and I'm pretty sure any collector will be. I mean, there's really not much to gripe about here, apart from those things I've mentioned at the beginning. But really, that is just nitpicking. This is a fabulous, very dynamic figure, very impressive figure, incredibly high production values, and I would say worth every penny. So thank you very much for joining me, and hopefully I'll see you next time.